Hit it.
Fuck off. Okay, welcome to the Talking with Apes podcast. This is our very first podcast, and we'll be tackling one of the most important issues of today's day and age, the wealth gap. It is growing. We all know it's there, but unfortunately, we don't really seem to have a solution. So we'll discuss some of those later. But right now, let's just look at how big it is at the moment. At this very moment, the world's net wealth belongs to the top 1% of people. We have heard Bernie say it. We have heard, many leftist politicians complain about this. But yeah, we agree. It is an atrocity that the top 10% of adults hold 80% of the world's wealth. This is not just a thing that's going on in the US. It's a thing that is happening in Europe. It's a thing that is happening in this world. These numbers are concerning the globe. I will ask my two apes I have sitting here. What do you think? What are some of the solutions that you have written down, or like little parts of the solution? Because of course this is a very big issue, and there's not one solution, unfortunately.
I guess I can start, and let's start with one of the most softer things we can do. I mean, I'm going full social democrat here. This isn't even socialism or anything, just social democracy. And in that case, we have to look at where we come from. Our social welfare states in Europe, like Belgium, which is one of the most well built out social welfare states. We have healthcare for everyone. We have compensation if people lose their job, or if they are technically without a job for a certain amount of time. All those things used to be funded by incredibly big redistribution and by incredibly big taxes on the wealthy and the rich in society. And then during Thatcher's period and Reagan's period in the US, all those taxes were lowered in favor of the idea of trickle-down economics, the idea that if we don't tax those wealthy people... Yes, it is bullshit.
Yes, indeed.
But it's the idea that if we don't tax the wealthy, then they'll invest their money and they'll create more jobs, and hence we'll see more welfare for the general population. Now, 50 years down the line, and we know that it's just bullshit. So why not right that historic wrong to begin with, and tax these people again at, 90% at some point, or at least 70, 80% above certain amounts of wealth that they had, above certain levels of income they had. I mean, I think it was if you earn more than $1 million or something, you get taxed at 70, 80%. That is a historic flaw, a historic mistake that was made. And I would argue one of the best and biggest things we can do is restore that. And we'll already be in a position where our social welfare state will be able to function again, which it hasn't for the past 50 years because it has no resources to work with.
Yeah, because you would be getting so many more taxes compared to the situation right now, you mean?
Yeah, I mean, think about it. We do have all these benefits at the moment, but they are incredibly costly. That is correct. They cost a lot. Caring for elderly people, paying their pensions, it costs a lot. Paying for education, subsidizing people in their education, it costs a lot. All these things cost a lot, and that is true. But they were affordable in the past because the state had a lot of money coming in from people that already were in a comfortable position to pay for those things themselves and didn't need them. So the entire idea was a redistribution effort. Now we did away with the money the state had coming in, but we are still paying out all the other social benefits. Of course, that doesn't work. The system is broken because it doesn't have any input anymore. It just has output. So restoring that would go a long way.
Yeah, there is something to say to, at what point does a person have enough money where you can basically almost tax them at 100%?
I mean, I guess we have made the joke. Beyonce is the example of that. She has 800 million. I believe that the Beyonce like border is there. You know, you have succeeded at life. Congratulations. Go find something else to do. I guess it's become a painter, become a dancer, anything. But you are in a position where wealth will not help you anymore in life. More wealth will not help you.
Yeah, so might as well contribute to the community and make sure that the world you live in is actually still, you know, benefiting from the work you're putting in.
Exactly.
Indeed. Yeah, we made the joke before, like you said, it's the Beyonce limit. Once you reach the Beyonce limit, congratulations, you won at life. Now can we please think about society? And the thing people don't realize, I think, is when we talk about taxing the wealthy or taxing rich people, a lot of people get their red scare triggered, and they're like, "Oh no, they're coming for my money. And I'm a successful doctor. I'm a successful engineer. Why do you want to tax me?" We're not taxing you, idiot. We're taxing the beyond the Beyoncés of the world. Like Beyonce is
the Jeff Bezos of the world.
Yes. Like, don't worry about your pension money or your little
Ferrari
middle class apartment in the suburbs or whatever. Don't worry, buddy.
You're not even anywhere near the people we want to tax.
Yeah, you're not even in the conversation, really. I know you like to think of yourself so much better than the people benefiting from these taxes and these benefits, but you are way closer to these people than you will ever be to a Beyonce. So, not just in the coolness factor, but also in the wealth factor, which is what's important. So yeah, like you said, it's a system that is broken. Unfortunately, it used to have much more input. Right now, the only input is us middle class workers paying obscene taxes compared to our relative salaries. Especially when you put it in comparison with what the ultra wealthy are paying compared to their wealth.
I mean, the thing is also, if you are at a certain level of of wealth,
You're in tip-top shape.
yeah, you can basically pay someone to make it possible for you to pay as little taxes as possible. So,
Abolish lobbying.
Sorry?
Abolish lobbying.
Yes. So the more money you have, the easier it becomes to hoard the money, and hoarding money just hurts the economy that, you know, these wealthy liberals seem to care about so much, or neoliberals, I should say.
It's basically making money meaningless. It's because if the money isn't doing anything, you destroy its value. You're destroying the value of this supposed wealth that you have.
Yeah, I mean, back in the day, a millionaire used to be someone who was incredibly wealthy. And nowadays, like we watched Citizen Kane the other day, and they're talking about how he spent $3 million on an opera building. And it's like, nowadays you would be spending a fucking billion to, you know.
For $3 million, you can't even get a shitty studio apartment, really. Let's be real.
I mean, depends on what city you're living in.
Depends on what city you're living in. I think if you're looking for something in New York, yeah. But yeah, I have no idea about but like, it is like you said, like we used to think I used to think $1 million is like the maximum wealth. That's like when you have just ended life. And apparently it's nothing.
That's like a house,
Yeah.
like a nice middle class house is $1 million nowadays.
Like if you won the
Europe.
lottery tomorrow for $1 million, for €1 million, I mean, I guess you could be fine, but you won't be like extremely wealthy, and you can secure a future for your future descendants or whatever.
I mean, that's the thing with investments. Like, you can of course be like, okay, I have money and I want this money to grow, but then you're also hoarding. But like, the thing is, we're not even talking about people that have $1 million. Like,
no, obviously not. It's just like $1 million is nothing. That's the point.
Yeah. And then of course, like, okay, so let's say we tax the rich.
Exactly.
And that's to you is the softest.
I mean, that is a full-on. We're talking about, to be clear, this was what the social welfare state was. This is what social democrats had envisioned and had built.
We're talking New Deal stuff.
Yeah, exactly. We're just talking 50 years ago, pre-Thatcher, pre-Reagan. This is what the social democrats in Belgium, like the SPA and the PS, in other places, in all over Europe, you had social democracy parties. This is what these guys did, and the Social Democrats are were amongst the softest on the left.
They also wanted to, for example, have inheritance tax, right? That was pretty high.
I mean, if somebody else wants to raise that as their preferred issue, I'm welcome to discuss that. But that was even a liberal idea. That was a liberal idea.
Interesting. Yeah, I think inheritance tax is also an important one to address because it's often overlooked and it contributes to how easy it is to accumulate wealth. And it also plays in very nicely with the social inequality we see between, for example, immigrants and people that have lived in a country like for generations, like in the US, for example, comparing white people to black people, the generational wealth you have just if you own a house, because prices are going up so much, for example, like your parents maybe bought a house for $30,000 at the time and now it costs $2 million, like that sort of investment and accumulation of wealth is also often overlooked when we look at these disparities between communities.
So inheritance tax would be all assets? What do you think? Like, do you think once a person is dead, that their assets should be redistributed by the state, not be inherited to their children?
I mean, I think the children could inherit it, but only to a certain amount. So like, for example, if there's like 5 houses and $5 million, like, maybe look at either they have to buy back some of the houses or they can only keep as many houses as they can possibly live in. If that family has 10 children, I think it should be handled differently compared to if the family has 1 child, I
don't know, for some reason I always think of disaster scenarios where how can the wealthy abuse this system, and you look for all the loops. You could just adopt 10 children before you die. You could,
but if you adopt,
those 10 children still each have one of those places.
Fair, but what we need
conjointly.
Yeah, true.
Like you still distribute the wealth over 10 adoptive children who probably would have never grown up with a house of their own. Like it's still better than what's happening right now.
Yeah, what's happening right now is.
I'm sure there's still like a dozen more loopholes that could be found.
Exactly.
But the idea is maybe we should start looking at it differently than we are currently doing. Because
definitely.
And again, it's not about parents inheriting their house to their child, like if you have a normal family.
Yeah, no, this is about your 3rd boat, which you have like registered in the Cayman Islands and the 5th mansion somewhere in the Swiss Alps or whatever.
Yeah, and it's about buying real estate just for the sake of investment, which drives up the price of real estate all over the world and which makes it impossible for low-income people to live anywhere.
Yeah, London is a prime example of that one.
Yeah, but it's happening all over Europe, and I mean it has been happening in the US for even longer. So there is so many things that used to be safety measures, so these things couldn't happen. And now it seems like they have been chipped away for so long that the wealth gap can just grow uncontrollably.
Yes, it is insane how, even with how struggling the welfare system it is right now, for example, in Belgium, some political parties are still trying to dismantle it even more.
Yeah, because of and then there's stupid excuses, of course, like, well, there isn't enough money to pay for everything. Well, of course there isn't enough money to pay for anything. You just, got rid of all the money you got coming in. That was the same idea. That was the same parties who came up with those ideas. And the inheritance tax one, like I said, it was originally a liberal idea because in opposition to the aristocracy, which got all its wealth through inheritance, the liberals and the bourgeoisie was like, maybe this is an unfair system, you shouldn't inherit an entire head start of like millions and later on billions. You shouldn't just start with that because it makes you per definition unequal to other people that don't have that. And your wealth should come, if anything, from your own actions and from your own smarts.
In the liberal world where every
Yeah.
man with his smarts and his work will
Exactly.
definitely get there if they just work hard enough.
Homo
But even these
economicus.
people thought inheritance was, oh, that's a bit too unfair, buddy.
Yeah, but I mean, we are talking like early liberalism, but still, they had a very clear idea, and that is, you have to get there on your own effort.
And yeah, it's also very fair. Like of course, the inheritance is a problem, and it could be maybe a part of the solution. But honestly, when I'm thinking about it, I'm like, we can't even tax these people when they're alive. Are we gonna be able to tax them when they're dead? You know?
But are we unable, or do we not want to?
I mean,
well, and with we, I mean our governments.
Yeah, that's the thing. Are we our government really? That's the thing.
Slippery slope territory.
We mentioned lobbying before, and that's the problem. When you have so much wealth, you start to influence government.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, it's unfixable. I know we are here to discuss solutions, but like when you think of it, like when there is so much wealth that it influences government. I mean, I don't know about Belgium or Europe in general, but because of the last 5-6 years in the US, we have all been very invested in US politics, and I've learned much more about US politics than I want to. And I learned about lobbying, and I learned about how even something as, like here in Belgium, when you want to fill your end of year taxes, you just get a bill from the government. In the US, you have to do all of the work. Why do you have to do all of the work? Because fucking tax companies who develop tax software and tax services are lobbying with the government to keep doing taxes difficult. And it's like, it is so backwards. And, if you as a government body or a politician, you want to be elected again, it seems to be like you shouldn't care about your citizens. You should care about the people who are paying you.
I mean, that is more true in the US than here. Where
Yes.
But there, even money is an even bigger part of campaigning and of politics. But I guess it does depend also on how well you are organized as a citizenry. I mean, even in the US, there is an example that, people can influence the political spectrum. Bernie Sanders was an example of that. And while he might not have won, it was still he still came relatively close, and he was extremely popular, and his ideas are now widespread. And so, another piece of foundation is laid for somebody else to build on, or for him to build on a second time or a third time, or how many times Bernie has tried by now.
Yeah,
Keep going, Bernie. But
hopefully he stays alive long enough.
And the AOC is an example of people like electing in somebody that they trust. And that
I see what you're talking about, but at the same time, I'm a bit skeptical about actual laws and actual policies. These people, yes, they get popular and they get maybe even elected, like AOC, but the actual policies seem to be never influenced by what the people want. We only accept it when it makes profit. For example, with the LGBT pride and stuff. Like, it's just a bit like, it feels a bit weird when every year Apple and all of these companies are like, yes, pride. And it's like, clearly, it's a market thing. It's never about, it's always about the profit, never about what the constituent wants or what the citizen wants.
But I mean, I think people like AOC are actually trying to really fight for what the citizen wants. I think there are those politicians out there, but they are also facing an incredible opposition, which doesn't end an incredible lobby, as we have discussed.
Yeah.
And that just makes it really hard to really bring about change. And I think a big part is also like the education that people have received over the years. Like, thinking about how my parents were thought about economics, like it was all very, I don't know how to describe it. It's like pull yourself up by your bootstraps and just make it happen, like if you're not lazy, you can live the dream. And like my dad studied economics for a while, and this whole idea of having capitalism save the day over and over, it was really ingrained in their brains. So of course that is still reflected in today's politics, because us Gen Zers / millennials aren't really like devoting power yet. And
Yeah, do keep in mind there is barely any. I mean, the past generation is still mostly in power, both in economical sense and in political sense, and also consider the US. One has to come from further in terms of redistribution and social standing and social issues than, for example, European countries, in which social democracy was way further developed and implemented. And the US has a two-party system, which makes it a lot harder
Yes, true.
to implement big swooping changes, it seems.
Yeah, just like when we're talking about the worst and we want to talk about the issue, for some reason I always go to the US because it just shows me like, what if we push this to its worst case scenario? That's the worst case scenario. That's how rampant it can be soon in Europe. You know, even with something as simple as like the idea of Trumpism.
Yeah.
Yeah, you saw how instant the influence was in Europe. It was just like that. We were, holy shit, we are back to Nazis? What the fuck is going on?
I mean, the Nazis were never really gone.
I know, but still, like, for them to be able to talk about what they want publicly, that's new. No?
I mean, Belgium also has horrible journalists. Like, I don't know, if I watch German news, because I am German, and I understand the language, I do never see also, like, or almost I see, like, I almost never see, there now I have it, people of the AFD, like the fascist party, talk for a longer time on television without a journalist like questioning them extremely critically. And in Belgium, you just turn on the TV and you see the most right-wing party arguing with the fascist party as if those are like the two opinions there are in this country.
I mean, to be fair to the Walloons, they don't talk with the fascists. So Walloons.
Yeah, but they speak French. I don't understand fucking French.
Yeah, I think
that's where you lost us, Wallonia.
For anybody who's not from Belgium, I think let me clarify something. We live in Belgium, and Belgium have a North Party and a South Party. The North part of Belgium speaks Dutch. We call it Vlaanderen. The South part of Belgium is called Wallonia, and we call them the Walloons.
And they speak French.
And they speak French. Here they speak the Dutch, here in the northern parts. And I think it's fair to say that these two parts have extremely different politics.
Yeah, like the Flemish part is pretty right-wing compared to other European countries, and the South part is pretty left-wing.
Or so they are portrayed, but that's a rabbit hole for another episode.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Just like I wanted to give, because we might have some people who are listening who are not from Belgium.
But talking about the way that Belgium was built and constructed, let's talk about colonialism.
Ooh, fun.
Because I saw that you were also mentioning that in your notes, Tom. Like, how do we deal with the damage done in the past?
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking, it's interesting because we've talked about the wealth within a generation, within a thing, with the redistribution of what you make in terms of money as an individual, the money you inherit, so wealth inequality over the generations. And one of the biggest examples of that, but also an example of wealth inequality between states themselves, is, of course, colonialism and what it has left us with. I mean, we cannot deny that the European countries and America as well are left with a giant colonial treasure hoard. Not that we have a pile of gold lying somewhere, but we do have, for example, the stations, the infrastructure, a lot of the stuff, a lot of the investments, a lot of the industry, all of those
Still
things.
some land too.
Still land, yeah. All of these things have been funded by plundering other countries. So of course we cannot talk about reducing inequality without reducing the inequality between what is sometimes it's always difficult, but what is recently called the global north and the global south. I always have to watch out with the terms that are being used, but I mean basically the industrialized countries mostly, and that includes Japan, for example, and South Korea. So it's not really just a Western thing anymore.
It's not. It's never been.
No, and it's never been.
But to be fair, who started the colonialism and the imperialism?
It's definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, we definitely kickstarted colonialism in Europe.
White men.
Trendsetters.
Yeah. Definitely.
The Brits, the Belgians,
for
the
example.
Dutch,
Yes.
the Spanish, our favorite people, really. Like everybody.
Yeah, you as a Middle Eastern.
Me as a Middle
You
Eastern,
must
like-
love the Brits and the
Yes,
French.
The Brits especially. Like, gotta love the Brits. God save the Queen.
But yeah, we can't. Any discussion about inequality can't go without the inequality between
Yes.
those places on the big scale, on a global
but
scale.
you say that so, as if it's the most normal thing in the world. But I think usually when we discuss inequality, we don't think about the global inequality.
We really don't.
We think about the inequality within Europe or within America. Like we think about people in our own country suffering. And like I don't agree with that obviously, but like I do want to point out that, that some people might consider you a bit radical for saying that we need to go back and solve all the injustice that has happened in the last 200 years.
Well, not every injustice that happened in the last 200 years, obviously, but I mean, it doesn't take away the fact that there is an incredible inequality gap between people or between the European states and, for example, the African states. Doesn't take away from the fact that within Europe there is incredible inequality of itself. I mean, countries like Poland or Moldova, or they have extremely terrible situations for people to live in, extremely bad situations sometimes. That doesn't. Those people are of course not privileged just simply because they live in Europe. Some of them have no access to whatever inheritance the European states have from that colonial time. They live in buildings that might be near collapsing or something. So, of course, that is still a truth in and of itself. It's just that if we look at it at a global scale, it turns out those people are in the same situation as people on the other side of the planet. And it makes less sense to think of it in terms of the country itself and between countries on themselves, and as much as in just a group of people that is incredibly wealthy because of that colonial inheritance, and other people that are not, regardless of where they live or not.
I mean, honestly, like 100 or 150 years ago, I think it would have been... The conversation we're having right now would have been much more about states, about the difference between India and British, for example. But now with a globalized economy, it's much more about just a group of people, no matter where the fuck they live. It's just this group of people. Like, I will tell you about wealthy people from Syria who have offshore accounts in Switzerland. Like the Assad regime and the Makhloufs, who are like the economical masters of Syria. And like, these are Syrians. They never inherited any imperial or colonial treasures. They are just assholes. And because of a globalized economy, they managed to take advantage of a situation that, yes, fairly was created by the Brits, mostly by the Brits and the French, but like by the colonials and the imperialists. And these people came along, and it's not that Syria is a poor country now. It's just this kind of what that blundering you talked about. It just allowed the environment, a very nice environment for such assholes to flourish, and they took advantage of it. So yes, I think when we're talking about like how do we fix this, it is two different fights to talk about the inequality within one country or within one society, and it is another fight to talk about inequality that has happened because of years of colonialism and imperialism. And how to fix that, I honestly have no idea, because it's very complicated. It is extremely complicated because, well, what do you do? Do you just like make the US or make Britain pay a shit ton of money? I mean, the British state doesn't even have money. That's our problem here. The states don't have money anymore. It's all in the hands of the fucking corporations.
Yeah, and one first thing that could be probably a good step is to, one, recognize it.
Yes.
Which some countries like Belgium still haven't done. And second, war reparations, which of course...
I mean, Belgium doesn't have a colonial past, does it?
Oh
that was
boy.
sarcasm for the people who have...
That was sarcasm.
I mean, Leopold, he built such beautiful stations. How could
fuck
we be
that guy.
mad at that?
My favorite
Fuck the
train
king.
station, Antwerp station.
I mean, but Germany had to pay the rest of Europe war reparations. How come Europe doesn't get to pay war reparations to the rest of...
Because that was not white people.
It didn't happen fast enough too.
Yeah, I mean, the laughter is completely correctly... I mean, the laughter is completely correct because it's absurdity.
Yeah, it is.
an
It is
absurdity.
it's basically racism too. Like, you know, like
it boils
why do
down to
you
that.
if you kill French people, you have to pay them a shit ton of money. If you enslave and torture a whole country in Congo and chop off their hands, it's like, oh yes, shit
Whoopsie
happens.
doopsie. You know what's the solution for that? Like do what the US basically did. Go to a country, murder most of its native citizens, kill basically all of them, and then when there's like 100 people left, you'll be like, hey, Native Americans, we love you so much. Here's some like benefits and stuff. That's what the US did. So you don't need to
I mean, that's basically, Belgium did that too. Like, if you want to come to Belgium now and you're Congolese, you can, but you have to become a full Belgian then. Like, you can't just come here.
That is
and-
so problematic.
I know it's fucked up, but
We are
we are straying away
Belgium
from
is still
the.
regularly asked for advice on issues concerning
Yes,
the
you
Congo.
have ruined that country for centuries, probably.
Yes.
Like the Brits ruined the Middle East, like
Yeah.
It is
the US
incredible.
ruined Iraq.
But I think, like, coming back to the wealth inequality issue, I think, of course, I don't know the full solution, but I think we need to definitely like start acting locally as soon as possible. I think politics needs to wake up and realize that, also with automatization becoming more and more of an issue, which is going to drive wealth inequality up even more if we let it, if a rich company boss can just hire a bunch of robots to do all the work and people are not needed anymore, like what are you going to do if you don't tax this person? Like, how are you going to pay the people so they can survive that are being let off if you don't tax that company boss? So I think Europe really needs to wake up and realize that the future is gonna have to be with more taxation of the rich. And once we get our shit together here, I think we can start, like, I think, of course this has to happen also as soon as possible, but maybe it's going to be harder to implement changes there because of course you also don't want to be like the fucking white savior comes in and like is like, here's the way that we do it and it works great.
Misha.
Yeah, Game of Thrones reference there. So like we need to work on that realization of we are one globe with like where there is people that need help in general. But I also think there is an issue with us coming in and being like, hey, this is how you can fix it, because
I don't think that's what should be happening, but definitely you should. Here's the thing, you could start locally, and definitely we should all start locally within our own communities, within our own societies. And the first thing you can do is just like make people aware, make people more informed, and which is like a big purpose of talking with apes in general. And the thing is, like, it reminds me of an analogy I'm gonna make here is like with the coronavirus vaccine development. Why has the corona vaccine, like, how did the vaccine get developed so fast compared to other vaccines, for example? And what they did was, instead of going through things linearly, instead of doing step 1, step 2, step 3 linearly, they started all of the steps together. And I think with the same inequality stuff, you could argue that you could first do the local and then do the global and then and then. But you could also start all of the steps globally, parallelly, like start with the local and at the same time start with the global too. It's not that hard. And especially we are, like, the reason why they did that with the vaccine is there is no time. And honestly, right now with climate change and automation and so many problems facing this fucking planet, we do not have a lot of time. And
no, we don't.
I do think that fixing the wealth inequality, it is like one of the best things we could do to move forward.
And it works because we have proof of what you're saying. The European Union is that. That was, an entire continent was devastated after 2 world wars, which they caused themselves. But nonetheless, that was the situation. And then a union, an economic single market was created. Not that I'm arguing in favor of capitalism here, but a place was created in which those countries, abolished the limits between themselves, basically, broke away the borders a bit, not completely yet. And there's still a lot of borders up, even in the economic sphere. But they started treating each other as equal and as one group. They started working together. And what we have seen is that, yes, a lot of money sometimes goes from countries like Germany and the Netherlands to other countries in the European Union. But as those countries that receive more money, as their economy grows and develops, so does the economy of the Netherlands and Germany and its neighbors.
Yes.
The union as a whole gets stronger because each part of it grows and gets stronger. And that's an example of what it would mean, I think, to right those global wrongs if you just start, treating other countries in an equal partnership.
I honestly think that is one of the easier and one of the best steps we could make, because right now, for some goddamn reason, everybody thinks that if we want to succeed, they have to fail. And it's just not like that. If you look at the whole globe, like, honestly, out of all the capitalist and the modern ideas we got, I've always despised all of them, but globalization has always held kind of a sweet spot for me, like a one global entity where all of the people are one people. That is what's gonna get us out of this, I think. And like you said, like the European Union experience, of course, you're still gonna keep the cultural borders. We're not gonna become one people. We're not arguing for a
uniformity. No,
that's not what we're arguing for.
Everyone can do whatever the fuck they like.
It's just like, if we work all for the same purpose, I do think it will become much easier than just focusing on our own little, like, even here on a Belgian level, the Flemish are like, we're focused only on the Flemish. And
it's a problem.
That just gets you nowhere.
We won't fix the big challenges coming on, like, towards us, like automation, climate change, wealth inequality. We won't fix them if we think within our own little bubble.
Honestly, the biggest example, global pandemic.
Yeah, exactly. These challenges have to be, faced head on by all nations together. And I think this is actually a really beautiful spot to maybe wrap up the first podcast. So let's start working on that.
Shall we do a summary?
Yeah.
So we have 1, great redistribution. Gotta love those pre-Thatcher taxes. 2, inheritance tax. High inheritance tax, yeah. And 3, neocolonialism. Please abolish it.
Yes, please do. And it's just a change in mentality, really. It's not anything really big. There is no big change of policies. You do not need to, as a wealthy country, you don't need to pay half of your money to a poor country. That's not what we're talking about. We're just talking about a change of mentality where you care about those people as much as you care about your own people. And believe me, you will become off better.
Yeah, you do benefit from that. And I also wanted to add that, what we said before, it's really not about taxing your doctor
Your
that
average
makes,
doctor,
like it's about taxing people that are insanely rich and that are getting to the wealth of whole countries, and this is just not something we want to see in the future, in our future, because let's be honest, these people are going to be dead soon, like
Yes.
some of them at least. So let's make sure that when they die, they also take with them that system of inequality. And
It is funny that these old people are like coming on pensions now. Like, we're not coming on pensions, millennials, Gen Zs. We are afraid of future problems like climate change and stuff, but like these boomers, they are just now retiring and they want to dismantle the social welfare system. Do we see how stupid that is?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm just like, am I insane?
okay, so in conclusion, let's just stop doing stupid shit.
Yes, please.
Thank you for listening to our first podcast, and we hope to see you next week.
See you next week. Bye.
Bye.